getting back to the attorney's fee on these different cases, what I want everyone to understand is that the attorney's fee is set by the statute that covers the amount that an attorney handling a personal injury case can charge for their services, and that is set for car accidents, slip and fall accidents, construction accidents at 1/3 of whatever is recovered. And for medical malpractice cases, the attorney's fee is what they call a sliding scale, where the attorney receives 30% of the first $250,000 that's recovered, and then that goes down by 5% for every additional $250,000, and it gets to its minimum point at $1.25 million of 10%. So anything that is recovered in a medical malpractice case over $1.25 million is the attorney's fee is 10% of that recovery. So it's a bit different in medical malpractice than it is in a normal, typical negligence case. But that's the way it is. That's the way it's set by the statute, by the legislature. And all of us lawyers have that same fee. Very rarely will you have somebody that adjusts their fee. And the other part of the fee is the expenses. And the way that works is that the attorney is entitled to recover the expenses that they paid out on your case in order to process the case. In other words, there are certain expenses that we must pay out in order to process the case, and those expenses are also paid back by the client out of their portion of the settlement or the trial verdict. And it's safe to say that, generally speaking, if you have sort of a typical car accident or a slip and fall case, generally speaking, the costs of those expenses are going to be somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000. And so, but we attorneys will give you a very precise accounting of every single penny that we spent in order to explain to you what was spent, and in order to, so you have confidence and comfort that, you know, we're not including in there any kind of expenses that were not spent on your exact case. So what that means is that, for example, when we file the actual lawsuit, the filing fee for that in the court is $210. So we pay that up front. We ask you to pay us back at the end of the case. And in addition to that filing fee, we have to have your lawsuit, your summons and complaint, served personally on the defendants. And for each defendant, that costs us about $100 to have the process server physically take the lawsuit, the summons and complaint, and present it by hand to the party that we're suing. And so that costs us $100. Now, again, it's $100 per person or per entity that we're suing. So that can add up. Then you have another document called an RJI, which stands for Request for Judicial Intervention. We have to file that with the court, and that's $95. That document allows us to have a conference with the court, also known as a preliminary conference, where we go in and schedule the depositions and any kind of documents that have to be exchanged. We set up a schedule for doing that, and that costs $95. Then when we do a deposition, we have to conduct a deposition of the other side, like the defendant, and we have to ask them questions, but we have to hire a court reporter to take that all down, as you know, court stenographer, and they have to write that down. Generally that costs at least $350. So these are general costs that we have to spend. Now that's not attorney's fees. In other words, the attorney my attorney or I myself will conduct the deposition, and that may take a whole day or half a day, whatever it takes. You don't pay extra for that. That's a part of the attorney's 1/3 fee that I was mentioning before. So the way it works out, just for an example, which I like to give with round numbers, is that if we were to settle your case for $100,000, the attorney's fee on $100,000 on a non-medical malpractice case would be 1/3. 1/3 of $100,000 is $33,333.33. The client's share of that $100,000 would be $66,666.66. Now, out of the client's share of that $100,000 would have to come the expenses that I mentioned to you before. Remember, the filing fees and the court reporter fees. And like I said, in a normal case, it's probably around $1,000. Sometimes we have to hire experts. We have engineers that have to go to the scene, take measurements, determine if there's any kind of statutory violations with a particular staircase or some sort of surface that a person fell on. That costs more. We pay for that up front, but we ask you to reimburse us at the end of the case. So that's an added expense. Again, we'll go over that with you. So, like I said, out of your $66,666 would come the expenses. Now, out of that $66,000 would also come your medical expenses. Now, if this was a motor vehicle case and everything was covered by no fault, there wouldn't be any medical expenses, okay? But if this is not a no fault case and you had to get treatment or you had to use your own private insurance, there may be what's called a medical lien that you would have to pay back out of your share. And this often happens, but remember, whenever there's medical liens, before we settle your case, we're going to present that to the other side and say, listen, buddy, you've got to pay for this person's medical expenses. So we get an increase in your settlement, or we present that at trial and explain to the jury, listen, that defendant who caused my accident has got to pay for my medical bills and my lost wages and these other things. So that's a basic idea of the attorney's fees. These attorney's fees are pretty much non-negotiable, okay? I don't know if it's something that the attorneys have just said amongst each other, but generally speaking, attorneys do not negotiate these fees. If you're working with an attorney that is charging by the hour, then those fees are going to be something that are different from one firm to the other. They may be negotiable, but when it comes to a personal injury case, the fee is going to be 1/3. And there are some cases that the attorney, obviously, if we settle a case and for a lot of money, we get a larger fee. If we settle a case for less money, we get a smaller fee. And generally speaking, much of the same work has to be done on each case. We have to file the lawsuit, we have to do the depositions, we have to exchange papers, sometimes we have to go to trial. So sometimes the lawyer will get a reasonable amount of money. Sometimes they get quite a bit less than the amount of work they had to put into actually processing and prosecuting the case. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. That's just the nature of this type of work. But generally speaking, lawyers are not open to negotiating for their fees. My name's Neil Redmond. If you have a question or you have an accident where you've been hurt, call me. I can be reached at 844-NEIL-RED. Thank you.